official program. And I'm going to start by asking each panelist to introduce themselves. Like I mentioned in the beginning, I believe, and I'll see if she pops up on my Zoom, but I believe Dr. Thompson had an unexpected conflict and either will be late or she might not be able to come at all. But if each of you wouldn't mind just introducing yourselves, you'll notice strategically that each of these people come from one of our sponsoring programs. So that was one reason that I invited them to speak today, because they represent a whole host of opportunities under each of their programs. So Dr. Boyds, would you like to go first?
Sure. Thank you, Stacy, and thank you for the invitation to participate. I'm Larry Boyce. I'm a professor in the Department of Hematology and Medical Oncology, in the School of Medicine, as the slide says. I'm also the Associate Director for Education and Training in the Winship Cancer Institute. And I guess I've been mentoring people for, well, my hair wasn't quite as gray when I started, I guess. I'll just leave it there.
In gray hair years. Okay, thank you. All right, Dr. Grenling, would you like to go next?
Sure. And Larry, I just hope the gray hair didn't come from the mentoring you've been involved with. I'm Kathy Grenling. I'm a professor of medicine in the Division of Cardiology. I have a basic science research lab. I've had that lab for about 35 years, so I've had lots of opportunity to mentor students and fellows. And then in my role in the dean's office, focusing on professional development, I've spent a lot of time thinking about mentoring faculty. So really happy to be here, Stacy. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. Dr. Hagan, you're up next.
Thank you. Yes, I'm Kimby Hagan. I am in the Department of Behavioral, Social, and Health Education Sciences, BSHES for short, over at the School of Public Health. And I am also the co-director of the Career Enhancement Corps at the Emory Specialized Center of Research Excellence in Sex Differences, or SCORE for short, and associate director of the Developmental Corps, which is essentially also a career enhancement corps for the Emory Center for AIDS Research, known as CFAR. I've been working primarily with faculty as a mentor, junior faculty for, probably about as long as Dr. Boyce, much earlier in my career. I also have very much enjoy working with our graduate students in RSPH when they're trying to think through how they're going to end up moving their learning into doing when they become public health professionals.
Learning into doing, that is a challenge, isn't it? Thank you. And I'm Stacy Holliman. I'm Associate Vice Chair for Research in Pediatrics, Associate Professor in Pediatrics, and I also oversee the operations for our K-12 program and have been involved in career development for a decade or more as well. And I'm really happy to be here facilitating a panel discussion by these great experienced mentors. So I'm going to give a little background, and then at various points in the program, I'll pause and pose some questions to our panelists. It's a little bit harder on Zoom, but to engage audience members, but I want the audience to know that we really want to hear from you. If you've got questions, please either raise your hand and you'll pop up to the top of my Zoom link, or you can unmute yourself and speak, or put your questions in chat, because we definitely want to give you a chance to ask questions as well. I've got a ton of questions because I'm a questioner, but any of your questions will take precedent over mine. So raise your hand or do any of the other things I mentioned if you have questions. So I want to start out by this definition of mentorship. There's lots of definitions of mentorship. I really like this one though, because it focuses on the fact that it's a dynamic relationship. It's reciprocal. And generally speaking, it's between an advanced career incumbent and a beginner. And the other thing I really like about this definition is it talks about promoting the development of both. So I think there's lots of concepts with this definition that I appreciated and valued. Talking about those advantages, so the advantages for the mentee are probably the ones we normally think about: career advancement, helping you sort of understand the ways of the world, like for salary job negotiations, networking, organizational professional identification. But I think there's probably also some for the mentors as well. Maybe their own career enhancement, maybe that feeling of altruism of passing the torch to the new generation. and even learning from the mentee. And I wanted to put this in here because we'll talk a little bit about later on about making it a win-win relationship. So what can you do for your mentor in terms of helping them as well, maybe passing on new technologies or ways to communicate, or just understanding the next generations that follow. So I did want to open it up. You might not have anything to add, but you might. So panelists, what do you personally derive from mentorship, or what have you seen your colleagues derive from mentorship that the mentees in this audience might want to know? And could you share any examples of those? Feel free to unmute if you have something on. Yes, Dr. Boyce.
Yeah, I mean, I felt like in that last list, there was a bit of all of the above there. I think for me, personally, yes, I think being involved in the training of the next generation of successful researchers is extremely important. But I think the other part of it for me, really from the beginning, was that I realized that we kind of live in a pay it forward world. I generally can't go back and provide much to, after I've left the labs that I was in, provide much to them at that point, other than, being successful and helping their career, being a good line on a CV at that point, and maybe a point of pride. But the only way I could really pay back the people who've mentored me was to pass that on to the next generation. And so I definitely feel very strongly that it is really about paying things forward. And again, that's probably one of the driving factors for me, because I felt like I had great mentorship, and still do. By the way, I even with my gray hair, I still look to certain people on this campus as mentors, even if I didn't tell them, and it's not a formal arrangement. There are people that I look to for skills that I now need for that kind of advice.
I would add that for me, it's about the relationship. I think what's rewarding to me is seeing a light bulb go on, or having somebody say, "Oh, I feel so much better." That clarifies things for me as I'm thinking, trying to think through something. So I really think that being able to help and being able to really make a difference for somebody's career as they're trying to figure things out and move it forward is what I find rewarding in mentoring.
Yeah, I want to add on to what Kathy is saying, that one of the most rewarding part of mentorship is the actual meetings. That when I'm meeting with people I'm mentoring, graduate students have a feeling that once they figure out what they're going to want to do, that's it, they found true north. And that turns out not to be the case. When you get a faculty position, when you get a fellowship, when you are, farther along, you're still working at trying to determine where true north is for you, for your research career, for your career in general. And meeting with the students or with the faculty members or with anyone I'm mentoring, one of the exercises that we do is we call it devil's advocate, is that they will propose something and I'll try to think of reasons why they shouldn't do it. Because what happens is that they discover themselves, the harder that they're defending against my spurious list of reasons why they shouldn't do it, begins to clarify in their own head what they really care about. And so, I don't have an emotional investment in a particular path that they should take. My job is to simply try to shoot it down in a gentle way so that they find themselves either moving in another direction or just digging their heels in which case now they are a big step forward in figuring out what it is that they do care about and where they want to go. And then we just start getting down to nuts and bolts about how to make that happen. But I truly enjoy those meetings.
That sounds both fun and productive. I'm going to hit you up next time I need to make a decision.
Oh yeah, it's great.
Right. Thank you for that. Those were really great examples and extras. And so now let's turn a little bit, because now we know, like, at least N of three, the three of you and your mentorship styles and kind of what you take out of the equations, and maybe people like what they heard. So how do people meet people like you, right? So how do you meet prospective mentors? So I'm just going to go through a couple of ideas of people that I know that have met their mentors just through simple Google searches, academic websites, LinkedIn, Twitter. Twitter is big these days in terms of really understanding how a scientist thinks and what's important to them. And that you could even make a connection on that. You can join listservs and attend seminars, attend K Club, attend networking events, do literature search, NIH reporter search. Ask your peers and near peers, as we're going to talk about a little bit later. It's not just about the science or the research, but it's also about kind of personality fit and style. So once you've identified a list of people that you're like, oh, I think that that person might be a good match for me, or they might have something that is important to me, how do you go about approaching prospective mentors? And I think this is where people get tripped up sometimes, because it's very nerve-wracking. It's like, sort of like asking somebody out for a date, like that kind of anxiety. Like, what if they say no? What if I say the wrong things? What if I get ignored? So a couple of ideas I'm just throwing out there, or a mutual colleague asking for that introduction, that can really help break the ice. And then it could put your name in the context of somebody that the prospective mentor knows as well. Maybe just asking for an informational interview. And that's a little bit of a low stakes game. So let's say you're interested in talking to somebody about CFAR, or you're interested in talking to Dr. Hagen, but you could pose it, if I really want to learn more about CFAR, could I set up a time to learn more about it? And then that way you get to know the person, you develop the rapport, and that would just get you one step closer to exploring a potential mentoring relationship. I'm sure many of the people on this Zoom receive those unsolicited emails. Dear Madam or Sir, I'm very interested in your research. And it's very, it's like spam, essentially. So really it's the emails that come through where it's clear that somebody did some research on you is what gets your attention. Oh, this is not just like some blanket email. They really care about me. They understand my research, the publications that I've put out, and that's really what they're interested in. If you do some kind of informational interview, you could, during that meeting, articulate your mentoring needs and suggest for mentoring suggestions. And then that way, if the person's open to it, they could say maybe them, or they could give you other suggestions. And I want to say this, always follow up. The mentee generally drives the relationship. And so we say a lot in K Club, begin with the end in mind. If you're exploring this relationship, you probably want to sort of lead off with, you're going to follow up. You're going to do what you said you were going to do. And then that's the kind of mentee that is generally quite attractive to mentors. So with that background information and just throwing out those ideas, I would like to open it up for the panel to talk about how prospective mentees generally find you. What is kind of, I mentioned those blanket emails are a big turnoff to me. What approaches are you most receptive to?
I'm going to start because I'm a little different from the other two in that I do not have an active research program. So those emails that I get saying, I'm very interested in the work that you do is an instant red flag. It's like, did you even Google me? How did you get my name to begin with? So if you are planning to use that approach, which is not bad, you should actually do what you said you were going to do in the email. Look someone up, talk about their work, indicate you have in fact made yourself familiar with what they do, because otherwise you're going to be very difficult to get their attention engaged. They'll recognize it for what it is, just a fishing expedition.
Absolutely.
So I have gotten mentees many different ways, but I want to go back to something Stacy had on an earlier slide, which is asking peers or near peers. So it's fine to go through a list and figure out who does research similar to what you do, but you don't know anything about them as a person and about their interest in mentoring. So it really is helpful if you can talk to a peer or a near peer, or if you have a student, get the students to talk to other students in the program. They find out a lot more about people's attitudes towards mentoring, their mentoring style, and whether or not it will mesh with their own style. So I think talking to a peer or a near peer, not about who are possible mentors, but what kind of a mentor they are, is really, really helpful. I have had, with varying success, the cold calls, people who want to come and work in my lab. But one very interesting way to hook up with somebody was I joined a national a program through my national society that we're trying to match up senior faculty with junior faculty for a mentoring relationship. And they had a questionnaire and they matched you up with somebody. And I matched with 3 people during the course of that program. And the first one, that was almost 5 years ago. And we've been meeting once a month for the last 5 years. And he's not really that close to the research I do, but it's turned out to be a really fun relationship. So that was definitely a cold call, but it was also curated to a certain extent.
Yeah, I was going to bring up a similar example. I am part of a training consortium in cancer biology, and they've done these what they call speed mentoring things, where it's either they've been in person at their annual meeting, or they've set up virtual ones, usually in the summertime, and it's free for anyone who wants to do it. And I don't know exactly how they match people up, but they end up matching people up with mentors for 15 minutes or something like that, or 20 minutes, just to talk to somebody about what they're doing, their research, their career. Most of the people involved in that have been graduate students, but there's been a few postdocs as well. And so I've met with a bunch of students over the last 2 years through this. And again, I think as Kathy's experience has been, that some of those have been a little more lasting than other ones, but it was a great way, I think, for the mentees, if they wanted to, if they thought, oh, this is a person I think I would like to get advice from in the future. It gave them sort of a no obligation conversation with that person. So I think looking for those kind of opportunities in the different societies that you're in, I think is a really good way that has emerged more recently for that. Other cases I can think of, again, most of the people who I consider mentees have been people who've trained in the lab, but it's not exclusively that. Some have been collaborators who didn't work for me but worked for somebody else, but they would come to me for advice because they got to know me through that relationship. So again, going back to Kathy's getting to know somebody, I've had another former student here who I think that person got to know me through we were both on a committee and decided that maybe I was a person that would be good to seek advice from for things. So I wasn't on their dissertation committee, I wasn't their mentor, but we would have meetings and mostly not to talk about the research, mostly to talk about all the other aspects of in this case, a graduate career. So I think those are all above. As for the cold calls, I kind of agree with Kimby on this one. If something is generic, I'm not going to respond to it. If someone has actually done their homework, I will respond.
Yeah, it's like the theme is you really got to put yourself out there and take advantage of speed mentoring or speed networking or even seminars and whatnot. And I know that if your individual society doesn't offer it, the Georgia CTSA has in the past. Certainly, there's lots of events the Georgia CTSA puts on along this vein.
Yeah, I wanted to mention that actually. So the Georgia CTSA has a formal mentoring program called Teams, where the focus is on mentoring team science. It's a small program. We take about 20 people a year. We match you with an individual mentor, and then you have group mentoring. That's another part of that program. We also, as part of that program, have something called a website called CTSA Match, and it's really a mentor matching website. Very underutilized. It takes just maybe 10 minutes to go onto the website, put in your profile, and see who you match with. So I will take a minute and find the URL and put it in the chat.
I think while Kathy's looking for that and putting it in the chat, I'll just say that I want to reiterate what someone said about that these are all going to ultimately be mentee driven. And I think we see this even with a lot of our, for faculty now, if you join a department as a new faculty member, you're almost always assigned some kind of mentoring committee or some kind of advisory committee. But it's really going to be up to the mentee in that case to really make sure that they're taking advantage of that, because And I think that's true for all of these types of opportunities, that ultimately it is really up to the mentee to drive all of this.
I wanted to add on by saying, if you're going to be doing cold calls, what works for me, I mean, I get as many emails in my inbox as everybody else in this meeting. And what will jump out at me is if the subject line either is an email from, say, Stacy Heilman, and the subject line says, virtual introduction to so-and-so's name, or the email comes from so-and-so, and the subject line says, Dr. Heilman suggested I contact you, like right off the bat, so that I even see the cold call email, is make it clear in the subject line what you're trying to do. And then in the body of the email, if it was, for instance, if Dr. Heilman had suggested that you and I meet, CC Dr. Heilman, so I know it's for real. And, or just get Stacy to send the email CCing you, the mentee. Say, I would like to introduce you to someone. I think that you two might enjoy getting to know each other. So just, and then like 2 or 3 sentences about both people on the email, and off we go. So you can do cold calls without them being truly cold.
Yeah, those are all such great tips. Thank you so much for mentioning all that. And actually, something that Larry, you said really tees us up nicely for talking about putting together a winning mentor team, because you mentioned that you had met this person and you weren't their primary research mentor, but you still consider yourself a mentor. So here's my question: how many mentors should you have? As many as it takes.
Yeah.
And I think that, now, probably 5 years ago, we had a K club that featured Ravi Patel and how he put together his mentor committee. And this, you don't need to read the details on this. This was actually a piece of his K-23 application that was ultimately successful, but it really showcased how many people it took to kind of hold him up and help him along his career. And he's very, very successful. So this was a successful mentoring team arrangement. I just wanted, since this is a K club, I wanted to pause for a moment and just kind of talk about all the different areas of mentorship that really need to be satisfied in a successful K application. So it's the mentor needs to have funding, research funding, and be stable. And so by stable, I mean, generally speaking, if they're on the last year of their R01, it's not going to be considered a viable mentor, because they have to have, if you're a K applicant for the next 5 years, it has to show this track record of funding, and you need at least probably about 3 years left on your NIH grants. Time considerations. If you're suggesting that Dr. Lucky Jane of the the department chair of pediatrics is going to be your mentor, it's not really going to be believable, because we have 650 faculty in pediatrics. And so maybe he is a part of the mentoring team, but not the only mentor. Aligned research interests, I think that goes without saying. People understand that. A strong biosketch, showing a strong research career of publications, of grant funding, of mentoring others. And then that going into that last one, that demonstrated commitment to mentoring career development. So having that track record. So you can see that if you put all these together, it's really hard to have one person that has it all, because somebody a little bit more junior might have the time considerations, but maybe they don't have the track record in career development. So thinking about putting together a mentor team is a really great strategy. Now, I think that there's lots of aspects to consider. We already talked about the track record in scientific writing and grant writing. Maybe if you're, let's say, a resident, but they have lots of experience mentoring PhD graduate students, that's not equal, right? Because of the fact that a PhD graduate student basically in the lab 80 hours a week, where a resident, probably not so much, because they are there for clinical training. So there's those other aspects that you need to think about. If they have an understanding of your time limitations, if they can help you set realistic aims and expectations in your goals for where you are in your career. And if they're really willing to, it's okay that they want to get something out of the relationship with you, but then you want a demonstration that they're willing to put something into it around helping you develop your own professional network. I want to take a moment and just focus on this last bullet, because this is oftentimes a pitfall in mentoring relationships, particularly with Ks, because a mentor is going to have you potentially, if you're in their lab, for example, work on a project that is an offshoot of their research. But then the idea is you're working towards independence. So you have to be really clear about what you're going to take with you and what the mentor is going to retain. And beginning with the end in mind is super important when it comes to something like this, because you want to be very clear in both your understanding and your mutual understanding about what is your project and what is the mentor's, and then also make sure that in your K application that comes through loud and clear, because that is a criticism that we sometimes see in K grants in the reviews, that it's not clear what the mentor owns and what the mentee will own in those cases. So there's a lot to unpack with all of that, but I just wonder if the panel could talk about maybe sort of strategies or things to think about ahead of time before a mentee thinks about putting together a mentor team, and maybe even thinking about introducing the mentor team to one another, because sometimes I think the mentor team doesn't know each other, and there might be value in having, like, sort of orchestrating those, building those relationships.
Hi, I was also wondering, I don't want to interrupt, but if I could ask a question. I'm a postdoc, actually submitting a K-99 this cycle.
Congrats.
Thanks. Yeah. We'll see. I'm in the thick of it right now. But yeah, so I have a question about what you just touched on, which is differentiating yourself from your primary mentor. I'm finding this is really hard, right? Because you, as a postdoc, you're like embedded in their research. And so in my K, I basically carved out like an expertise in lipidomics, which my primary mentor is not doing. But the main outcome is kind of like very much within her territory. And my fear is that a panel is going to say, you're basically trying to be your really awesome primary mentor. So I was wondering if you could kind of talk on how different do you need to be from your primary mentor, or what does that, or maybe it's how do you craft it?
Yeah, would any of the panelists like to respond to that?
I think, well, good luck with your application. First things first. But I think that, some of that's up to the mentor to actually deal with in their letters also, is to make it crystal clear that what you're proposing is going to be something that is going to be your project to take forward, and that, they may be more than happy to help you with that, but it will be your independent project, and they're not going to, continue to work and compete in those areas. And so that's what I always put. And the truth is, it's like I'm not a big, I know some people like to do a lot of grants, like to do a lot of bolding and underlining and italicizing and stuff like that. And I got to say, I'm not huge into that. But in those letters that I write for Ks, that's the one thing that I put in bold, is it's their, this is their project, and this is what they're, going with. And I think that's actually the best way to get a committee from, to believe that is to have that strong statement.
Yeah, I was going to say exactly the same thing, that it's going to be in the mentor letter where they explain the point at which your proposed project diverges from their work, and that they're there to have provided the base, but you're now moving in a direction towards independence by looking at a research question, a specific research question that their lab is not exploring. So they have given you the training, but they're not looking at this question. That's you're looking at it. So yeah, I think that the biggest piece is going to be, because that's where the review committee is going to look at, is they're going to look to see what the mentor has to say about the place where you differentiate from their work.
And I wonder, Brittany, if you're also thinking about this, is it, and it may or may not, you don't need to answer, but also you need to be on the same page as your mentor, right? Like, do you agree on this? They can say that all day long and put it in bold, but the reality of it needs to be that you are on the same page about what's going to be yours, and even thinking through about what your anticipated results are going to be, and then what the aims of the resulting R01 or the R00 in your case. So you said you're doing a K99 R00, right? So in a way, it's baked in, like you already are going to know that you agree that those R00 aims are going to be yours. Kathy, I'm sorry, did you want to say something?
Yes, I agree with what everyone said about it being really important for the mentor to indicate that. But I also think that what they're looking for is, science changes quickly, and they're looking for you to put together a project that will probably take you in a different direction. So it's going to open up new ways for you to differentiate from the mentor. Differentiating from your mentor is a gradual process. That's why the first part is a mentored phase. So I don't worry so much that the outcomes are the same. You're bringing lipidomics in. Lipidomics is going to open lots of different avenues for you to study that will be different from your mentor, because lipidomics by definition will give you a ton of data, right? So it's, I think, also emphasizing the possibilities and the directions you can go that are going to be different from the way your mentor is moving.
Thank you. That's very much the angle I'm trying to spin.
Yeah, and I think that that's such a great example. Thank you so much, Brittany, for speaking up and asking that question, because it really exemplifies how a mentor team is so important, because you've got your primary scientific mentor, but presumably you've got a lipidomics mentor too. And that lipidomics mentor is helping you take it in this new direction that's completely differentiated from your primary mentor's main focus. So great example, great example. I'm going to move on to what makes a good versus a great match. Let's pause for a little mental break. You can read this cartoon. I would like a mentor like that. So a good match is the research aims or the research scope, the skills, the experience. But what makes a great match? To have all of that, plus that what we talked about before, the personality, the work style, the motivation, the goals, the challenges. You can work with someone who maybe is not a perfect match with these 5 other areas, but boy, it goes a lot more smoothly if you have the so-called total package, or as many of these checked off as possible. So you already talked a little bit, and Kathy, you said it beautifully, like ask your friends and your peers and your near peers, like, what is this person like? Like, am I likely to mesh with them? And I will tell you that one of the mentors in pediatrics, who's a fantastic mentor, he is also has very high expectations. And he told me, he says, right in the first meeting, I just say, this is how I operate. I operate great with people who are like that approach in a person. If you don't, then I wish you the best of luck. We probably wouldn't be a good match. And I really appreciate that, because it's a super direct approach. You're not always going to get a mentor who lays it out like that. So do you all have examples for how mentors, aside from asking their friends, or maybe there are certain questions that mentees could ask the prospective mentors to sort of assess this part of the equation?
Some of it just comes down to time. Everybody's schedule is busy, and different mentees would have different expectations about how often we meet. And a mentee who proposes that we get together, say twice a year or once a quarter, doesn't work with me, because I like more regular contact with people. So one of the questions that we try to get off when we're first talking is, how often, I'm asking the mentee, or the prospective mentee, how often would you like to get together? And it's not like their answer is the make or break, but it's definitely is a factor. Because like I said, if they start out saying, well, I think if we could get together like maybe once a year, well, that tells me that's actually just a checkbox for them. They're not really trying to pursue a relationship.
And then they could ask so then that's a perfect question that they could ask a mentor on the flip side, right? Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. How often would you like to get together? Mm-hmm.
I love that.
So when I interview our clinical cardiology fellows who are trying to decide what lab to work in, clinical research fellows, I always ask them what they're looking for in a mentor, because if they tell me they have, they need somebody every week to sit down with them and plan experiments, I'm not that person. I don't have the time to do that. I'm a hands-off mentor. I will provide advice when you need it, but I'm not going to be looking over your shoulder at every experiment you do. And that leads into that discussion of, what works for them. Some of them will tell you, I want a physician scientist who's a woman. Well, that's going to rule out a good half of our, or a little more than half of our mentors, right? So thinking about, how much you need that mentor to be like you and how much and what style they have, what their style of mentoring is. The comment about how often they meet, when we first created a mentoring program in the Department of Medicine and we tried to do some evaluation afterwards, the only thing that correlated positively with the success of a mentoring relationship was how often they met. And if they met less often than every 2 weeks, there was a downhill trend. So that is a really important question. I agree with Kimby on that.
Wow, that's impressive. And I will say that, so flipping it around from a mentee's perspective, they could always ask you as a prospective mentor, what do you look for in a mentee? What mentees are you most successful? What the relationships, what qualities in mentees predict success for you?
Yeah, I'd have to think about that one. I guess you probably have to ask the mentees on that one. But I would say that I would just gonna reiterate that what I do for the meeting part of it is I agree with everything that Kimby and Kathy said. And so in my lab, it's always been I meet with all the mentees once a week. That's my rule. But it's some of them, if they're more senior, it could be once every 2 weeks, but that would be the rule for that. But I've always also said that even though my door is currently closed at the moment, I have an open door policy. And I've also tried to force myself to walk through the lab and things so that I could be available. So I do meet with some of them only the one time a week because that's what they choose. But there's others that show up all the time. And I have to say that some of the ones that show up more often are the people that probably could have been more independent earlier, but they wanted advice. And I do think there has been some success with those people that do that. But it's not I wouldn't say that, it's a hard fast rule on that. It depends on their personalities. I have to say, I love the way that a lot of the, with graduate school and graduate programs, you always start off with, doing rotations in the beginning, at least, in the United States. And I always tell students about rotations that, that there's really it doesn't really matter whether an experiment works because it's such a short period of time. What you're really trying to do is right. You should be using that time to figure out, is this going to be someone I can work with and for? Because I always find it, as kind of one of your first slides alluded to, that's kind of what mentoring relationships can be like. And so hopefully with things moving towards more of a peer as things advance. And that's far more important, figuring that, and whether obviously it's something you're interested in and whether it's an environment that you're comfortable working in, than whether in a very short period of time an experiment worked.
Yeah, Larry,
Wow.
I should have clarified. I agree with you that for trainees, meeting once a week is essential. The 2 week that I referred to was a faculty mentoring program.
No, I agree. And like I said, I've had some postdocs that were a little more senior. There it was closer to 2 weeks, and I've had others, just for different reasons. But absolutely.
Yeah.
My favorite personality match is when we discover that both of us like to end the meeting with our marching orders. We compare what we're both going to do before the next one, and we start the next meeting by checking on our list. I mean, those who are list people like me, we bond.
I love that. And that actually tees up our next topic perfectly. What makes an amazing mentee? And so I'll just give a little pause for this little mental break. So that could be a success. So I think that here you go. Being, of course, respectful of the mentor's time and privacy, even though Dr. Boyce has said he has an open door policy, one of his mentees walks by and it's closed. There was a good reason for it because he's sharing this hour with us. So following up and checking in, good organization and making optimal use of your time together. I think that this, to me, is super important. It is not, even if you're not the marching order person or the list person, remember the mentee is driving this relationship. The mentor probably has potentially a handful or even more of these relationships. And so the mentee has to take ownership. So that includes driving the scheduling process, setting expectations early and often, being well prepared and defining what that means to your mentor, because if you have a mismatch on that, that could spell disaster. Setting goals, milestones, establishing realistic timeline, really just being a project manager. And then I think going back to 3 and defining what being prepared means to each of you, considering establishing a formal mentoring agreement is a really good thing to consider. Seems like maybe a little bit heavy to some people, but I've seen lots of circumstances where it works quite well. And I'll send these slides and you'll have a link to that if you want to check it out. But here's just some of the components that are included on many of them. Just really what the objectives are. So the research objectives, what the relationship structure would be like, how often you agree to meet, putting it on paper. Maybe you just assume it's going to be weekly or bi-weekly because that's what we said here, but it's going to vary. So you want to set those expectations, what the responsibilities of each of you are, what the needs are. Maybe you have to go pick up your kids from daycare by 6 o'clock. And so you want to articulate that you really can't be taking any meetings between this hour and this hour, or maybe your mentor has the same kind of arrangement. And so you each want to know that. Or how you can communicate. Can you text each other? Maybe it's just email. Mutual expectations and goals, being really specific. If you want a first author publication by this date, then articulate that to your mentor and then see if you can fill in kind of the steps to take to get to that part and actually saying what those concrete measures of success and progress are. And then also talk about confidentiality, contingency planning, and that sort of thing. And so this list is not exhaustive, but I think that there's a number of things on here that are important to consider as you start exploring these relationships. Once you do have your regular meeting times, you can, of course, talk about, these are just no-brainers in terms of what you should talk about, the planned experiments, interpreting data from your already accomplished experiments, looking at the mentoring agreement and seeing what did we agree upon that we wanted to do, what's the progress towards these, and then making sure that you're getting the feedback that you need. But if time permits, there's lots of other things that can be talked about in these meetings as well. And so putting up front that these are things that you want to touch upon, at least as a mental checklist of like, oh yeah, responsible conduct and research is for real. And we do need to schedule some time to talk about these kinds of issues. So I'm really curious to hear from any of our mentors if they have used a mentoring contract, and if not, or if yes, like how does it work and how do you organize all of these kinds of topics that we just talked about?
I have a program that I run called CFAR Adelante that's intended to expand research in Hispanic, Latina communities. And those are my awardees have to have a CFAR affiliated mentor. And as part of that, there is a formal mentoring contract that they have to put together and both sign off on as part of their application process. And I kind of like at a one step removed from that, review that on a regular basis to find out what's working and what's not working. But it has been something that we have been doing for more than a decade because it works. When people have got that in writing and recognize that that there's flexibility, that once it's there, it's not written in stone, then there's just less questions about this. They have a concrete place to start from. So I'm a fan of them, even although I am less likely to use them with my faculty mentees than I am with the CFAR Adelante. I absolutely am totally a fan.
Thank you, Kimmy. Larry or Kathy, any comments on setting expectations with mentees?
I mean, I think setting expectations is obviously important to do. I've never used a formal contract like or something like that to do that. But I think the point of setting expectations is important. Yeah, I don't really have much more to say about that. I mean, I could probably discuss why I haven't done that. There have been times where I've thought it would have been really useful, and I've even been involved in some cases where there were some challenges, and we did put something in place, and I don't know that it actually solved the problem sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that setting expectations is really is important, and not assuming you're on the same page when you're not could be very disastrous. All right, let's turn over to making it win-win. We alluded to this in the beginning that, what can the mentees do for the mentors? So making them feel good, passing the torch, you paying it forward, all of those I think are really important. I did wonder if any of the panelists ever had a mentee like provide something to them, like, I don't know, maybe get them involved in Twitter or something like that, that they wouldn't have normally done, that you consider it like sort of an unusual win, just to get people thinking about what a mentee's role is and what they could be doing to almost pay it back to the mentor, so to speak.
Well, I'm very intellectually curious, and when mentees bring areas of research to me that I haven't had a chance to really explore, it's just cool. I can learn about stuff that's outside of my field. So that is, I would not discount how exciting it is to give your mentor a chance to learn about your work if it is not completely in line with their own. We're in this because we kind of like asking questions, right, Stacy?
Yeah, yeah, that's a good one. How about like reviewing papers or something like that? Do you ever have anyone ask people to do that? Or let's see, just kind of like something that's on your to-do list that you think a mentee, it could be a win-win because they're learning how to review papers and you get a head start on it. Are there any examples like that?
I've asked mentees to help me review papers. I think actually a lot of journals are now, they're even giving credit for this now to the mentees. They ask you those questions on that. So I have asked that, and I've even sometimes where there's been a paper I've been asked to review, but I don't have time, I've put the mentee down as a potential reviewer, and they have sent the papers to them as well. And I'll work with them just to make sure, that they're not, that they're being, fair if they have never done it before. My postdoc advisor did that for me a long time ago and had, gave me papers to read and review and do that. So that's definitely something that I think the other examples for this, I don't know about that I wouldn't have expected, but I think I've been very fortunate, really in the last several years, of having mentees who have brought some kind of approach or technology or something to the lab that I was, did not have great expertise in. So it did become somewhat of a learning experience for me as well. So we did learn together, because I obviously had things that to help them in the systems and the biology and the questions we were studying, and they could provide, use tools that they could not have learned from me. And so that's been a great experience for me over the last, really the last, 5, 6, 7 years.
Yeah, I want to echo that. That's been a recurring theme, I think, in mentoring trainees, is they usually bring something to the lab that they knew from their previous lab. Because I've had a lot of postdoctoral fellows, and they bring something that I'm learning, they're learning from me, and I'm learning from them. I also think that because I have a lot of faculty mentees, I learn a lot about the kind of general themes of things, of issues that they face, or ways that their particular generation approaches things. And that's really helpful in relationships with others, because you recognize that, Generation Z is different from Generation Y and X and Y, and the approaches you need are different.
Yeah, I think those are all such great intangibles that are very, very tangible. Definitely do not want to end on the challenges in the relationship, but there are potential pitfalls, right? We have the number for the mentees, a number for the mentors. And I think that what I would like to do is talk a little bit about we talked a lot about in this conversation about the potential mentoring challenge, but what can you do about those if you're experiencing anything like this? And this actually gets to Brittany's question as well, not this first one or the second one, but the third one. So arbitration, if you have, and the mentoring agreement might articulate this. So who would you go to if you had a disagreement? Who's going to adjudicate that? So referring back to the mentoring agreement. I think that here I want to talk about Crucial Conversations, which is a program that's offered by Emory Office of Learning and Development, I think it's called. And to your question, Brittany, they have tremendous programming. Crucial Conversations is one of the ones I've taken like 3 times over my course at Emory, and I learned something from it every time. And it really is about not trying to have these conversations when the stakes are high, and it works in all facets of life. It works at work, it works at home, and really learning the strategies to what this is, the sort of the schematic that they have. There's a book on it too, but the programming at Emory is fantastic. All of the experts in that office are tremendous. And so I definitely recommend you all take a look at the Office of Learning and Development. I think that's what it's called. So check that out for sure.
Would you either add to the slides or put into the chat a link to the office you were talking about just now?
Yes, I definitely will. So while I'm doing that, do any of the panelists have other suggestions for how to either prevent these challenges or how you've successfully managed them?
Just mention that going back to that setting expectations piece. So even if you don't use a formal mentoring relationship, setting expectations avoids so many problems in the future that I think that's a really critical piece.
Yeah, I agree. I would just say, for having to address things and that seems to me, at least when things like that have happened, it's somewhat dependent on who the mentee is and what, is this a student, a fellow, a postdoc, a faculty member? And I think the answer is going to be different in all those cases. And so,
Yeah, for sure. I think I'll go ahead and end on this slide. I think that, we talked a lot about a lot of different topics, and I want to thank our panelists so much for sharing your expertise and experience with us. I think you could really encapsulate it in poor communication is kind of at the top of the list of unsuccessful relationship, where good communication with mutual respect, clear expectations, shared values, personal connection, and reciprocity are all a recipe for good success. So I think that with that said, we're just really thinking about these types of not just one, it's not a single facet relationship, it's multifaceted. And with all these topics and aspects in mind, I think that everyone should feel pretty well prepared to start building their mentoring relationships. We have a couple of minutes left. If there are any final questions from the audience that anyone would like to pose. I know I do a lot of talking in these facilitated panel discussions, so I really appreciate Brittany you piping up, but is there anybody else who want to unmute and ask a question before we close? I'll stop share so we can see each other. No, okay. Well, I'm looking to see, next month we have a really great K Club planned. And so you should be on the lookout for that announcement and invitation coming soon. So with that, I really appreciate everyone's engagement and participation, and we'll see you all next month.